As some of you may or may not know, my name is Dr. Manrina Rhode and I was once an actress. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey and about how life was different as an actress from how it is as a cosmetic dental surgeon. So at one point in my life, I moved to America, and obviously we're not allowed to work as dentists in America without regraduating. And it's not that easy to regraduate. There's only there's like 20 programs within the country that allow you to do that. And they're in certain states. So if they're not in the state that you're planning on living in, then it means that you're not going to, you're going to be out of state and only be able to come back in state at the weekend. And apparently they're quite intense programs, these shortened programs. They cost about $200,000. They're a significant amount of time and spaces are limited. So when I moved to America, without immediately retraining as a dentist, although dentistry is a passion of mine, I kind of went back to being my 18-year-old self and thought, what did 18-year-old Manrina want to do with her life? And actually, when I was choosing my A-levels at 16, there was a big toss-up between acting and dentistry. So I thought maybe this is my time to explore an acting career. So I was really fortunate while I was out in Atlanta to get signed by one of the biggest agencies out there. I was fortunate in that the look that I have is not obvious. I could go for roles that were Indian or that were Arabic or Spanish or Italian or South American and pass off as them. The tricky part was that the accent. So being British and not American, there were limited roles for someone who looked like me, but then also had a British accent. So I started with an accent coach to work on my American accent. But the issue with that was that just like in England, we can tell when we talk to someone which part of England they are from. Equally in America, they can do the same thing. So it meant kind of learning an East Coast, a West Coast, a Louisiana accent, a New York accent, and all the rest of it. So there were definitely complexities involved with this whole casting process that I was going through. Also, I went into acting school, and it was such a great experience to learn to be an actress. And one of the training styles that I was being trained in is called Meisner. And Meisner believed that you don't act from memory. So, if you're trying to show an emotion, say an emotion of someone dying, then you don't use a previous memory. So you don't think back, let me think back to when my grandfather died and how I felt back then. Because he believes that although the emotion was raw at that time, you've had time to acclimatize to it. And so you won't really get that real depth of emotion bringing back an old actual event. So rather than bringing back an old event, he wanted you to imagine that it just happened to you right now with someone who's currently in your life. So, we had the main emotions that we had to work on. The thing with, I was doing acting for film, so acting for TV and film. And the thing with TV and film is that no one wants to watch your everyday life, right? So it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your life is just your normal everyday, and maybe that's not so interesting, but it's that 20% when interesting things happen. So extreme emotions like devastation or you're ecstatic, that are quite interesting to watch. So it was the extreme emotions that we were working on. So, for example, I think, being ecstatic was a great one. I envisioned that I had been selected to be the Bond girl in the next, or Bond lady in the next Bond movie. And I thought, really imagined it, really could feel it. And through that, there was a whole load of joy that came running through my body, and joy comes really naturally to me. And so that was easy enough. It was devastation that was the really difficult one. And, I had to imagine someone I really loved and someone that was very close to me passing away. You'd go through the exercise and imagine that it happened, and you'd start responding to it. And then, the shooter would be like, go deeper into it. And you'd be on the floor and you'd be crying. And then he'd be like, I still don't see it. Go deeper into it. And he'd keep taking you deeper and deeper until you were literally on the floor, couldn't pick yourself up. So completely consumed with grief. And then he was like, right, that's it, you're there. And then you'd go home at the end of the day, go home to your family and to your partner, and they'd be like, oh, how was your day, love? And you'd be like, yeah, fine. How was yours? When really you just spent, a few hours of your day crying in a heap on the floor. So that was really interesting. The other interesting thing about Meisner training was that it encouraged you to have an opinion on everything. And in the corporate world or in the medical world, we are trained to never show our emotions. So when you're talking to a patient, whether you're telling them great news, you might just tell them, oh, that's great, this is going to happen. You're not going to jump around the room like a loony. And equally, if something bad happens, you're not going to oh, your teeth are going to come, we'll have to take all your teeth out. Oh no, what are we going to do? You're just going to be very level-headed and matter-of-fact about it, whatever you have to tell your patient or whatever they say to you. So it's something that we're trained to do in adult life within the corporate or medical world. Whereas acting is exactly the opposite. They wanted us to react to everything. And so part of the training class would be, you look at each other. It's called an exercise called repetition, and you pick up something that you see immediately. So I'm looking at you. What's the first thing I thought? You've got lovely eyes. And then you'd repeat to me, I've got lovely eyes. And then I would repeat, you've got lovely eyes. And then you would repeat, I've got lovely eyes. And then he'd go on to, well, how does that make you feel? And I say, so how does that make you feel? And then the person would have to respond and be like, actually, it makes me feel a bit gross. I feel like you're perving on me. Or it could make them feel, actually, that really brings me joy, because people don't often give me compliments. And so you don't need to give the reason why it makes you feel that way, but you do need to acknowledge that it makes you feel a certain way. And that was really interesting, because obviously I'd had all this time in my life trying to come away from those emotions and not really feel anything. So, someone would say something to me and then the tutor would be like, how do you feel? And I was like, I don't feel either way, because I don't really care what this person thinks about me. And then he was like, that's not true. That either made you, that comment, that compliment, either made you happy or it made you sad. And which one was it? And that was interesting to kind of express that. And then that also filters through into your personal life, because, I'd go home and, my partner would be like, oh, we're watching CSI tonight. And, normally where I'd be like, yeah, okay, great. I'd be like, I don't want to watch CSI tonight, because suddenly I was very in touch with what I actually felt rather than just being okay with everything. So, and the people around me started to notice a difference. They were like, what's up with Manrina? Why is she so opinionated on everything? And it was because it was what I was being trained in on a daily basis that then came through into my private life as well. So that was all very interesting. The other interesting part of it is the rejection. I would be called, your casting director will be like, oh, you should apply for this role. There used to be a lot of self-tape. So I had a self-tape set up at home. They'd send you a script. You'd spend time memorizing a script. As dentists, we're not used to memorizing anything. We never memorized anything. We understood text and then we learned it. We didn't memorize it. But suddenly you had to memorize text. And if during that audition, you decided to change the text in any way, and there were dentist roles that I auditioned for that I had to say incorrectly, because if I decided to change them in any way to correct them, then the casting director or the script writer would be like, oh, do you think you can do my job better than me? And they'd quickly get offended. So it was about sticking to the script word for word and memorizing them. So you'd get this audition and then you'd learn the part, you'd look the part, you'd memorize the lines, you'd get into character, you'd set up your studio, and you'd film that. And it was all a bit of a, it took time, and you'd get one of your acting friends to come over and run your lines with you. And you might get, I again, because I fit a lot of the looks, I might have got 3 auditions a week, that I was preparing for. And they're not really getting cast for any of them for probably a multitude of reasons. And one main one would be my accent, that, they're not typically looking for a brown person with a British accent. So it didn't really match. I remember one audition I went for, they were looking for a British dentist to play a part, and I was like, this is my role. I am a British dentist, but obviously I don't look like a British dentist, and that was the feedback that my agent got from the casting director, saying we can't hire for this because she doesn't look like what the character's meant to look like. So it was all a bit of a thing, and then you don't get paid for these auditions. So it's not like in dentistry that if you go to work, you will get, even though we might be self-employed and not salaried, you will get paid for your day's work. In acting, mostly you won't. You'll just you will do the audition and not necessarily get the part. The majority of actors in the US work 20 days a year, and with the SAG-AFTRA payments of $800 a day, they're not on much more than $20,000 a year. So that's where they often have second jobs as yoga teachers or whatever else that can be flexible around their acting passion. So to be an actor, you really needed to do it like They say you need to want it like you want to breathe, so that you can put up with the rejection and with the hard work you need to be put in, and the low salary, unless you make it big, which I'm sure it's less than 1% that really do. And then of course there's the rejection, that when you go somewhere that you're auditioning for a part, and if they don't take you, and if they say it's something to do with the way that you look, and kind of being quite confident about that. And then I think finally it's about the position of power. And the fact that there is no power. The casting directors, the script writers, they're as dentists, we are the king or queen of our surgery, and everyone listens to what we say, and we kind of run what's going on here. We are the expert, whereas there you're not. I remember I did one audition as a hand model, and it was a really well-paid job that, I've got quite nice hands, cutting something. And as I was cutting, they were running late for the audition. So I went and I was cutting this courgette, and I said to the casting director, by the way, the knife's a bit blunt, and actually if you sharpened it, you'd probably get through these auditions quicker and you'd get better takes. And he was furious. He said, how dare you correct me? How dare you correct me on camera? What are my seniors going to think now? And I was like, wow, in our industry, we'd appreciate the feedback, but in that industry, there's no room for feedback. So lots of pros and cons there about how the acting world is really different from our wonderful, beautiful dental world that we live in. And I was so grateful actually to come back after 2 years. And when I came back and acting opportunities came in, I just kind of turned them down. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm really happy where I am. I really love my job as a cosmetic dentist. And I'm very happy to throw myself back into that and be grateful for the opportunity, but also be happy to not visit it again. Hope that helped.